Good evening, Professor Huang. This is Kolluru presenting my SPL 6 video assignment. So tonight I'm going to talk about the systems development lifecycle. So the method the methodology was first of all developed in the 1960s to manage the large software projects that were associated with corporate systems that were running on mainframes, and is a very structured and risk-averse methodology designed to manage large projects and databases that include multiple programmers and systems that would have a large impact on the organization or company or firm. So there's various definitions of the SDLC methodology, and some contain 5 phases, like the one we discussed in the presentation. Some contain 7. Our textbook contains 7, so I'm going to discuss the 7 that were discussed in the textbook. Those are preliminary analysis, system design, programming, testing, implementation, and maintenance. So first, preliminary analysis. Now, in this phase, a review is done of the request, and it's like if you're creating a solution, or if a solution is possible, what are the alternatives, or what's currently being done about it, if the project is a good fit. And it's a key part of the step is deciding whether it's feasible or not, which includes an analysis of the technical feasibility, the economic feasibility, and the legal feasibility. So, is it possible to do this? Can we afford to do this? And are we even allowed to do this? So this step is probably the most important in determining if the project should even get started. Next, you shift into system analysis. Now, in this phase, one or more system analysts work with different stakeholder groups to determine the specific requirements for the new system. No programming is done in this step, but instead, procedures are documented, key players are interviewed, and the data requirements are developed in order to get an overall picture of exactly what the system is supposed to do. So the result of this phase is a system requirements document. Then we shift into system design. Now in this phase, a designer takes the system requirements document created in the previous phase and develops the specific technical details required for the system. And it's in this phase that the business requirements are translated into specific technical requirements. The design for the user interface, database, data inputs and outputs, and reporting are all developed here in this phase. So the result of this phase is a system design document that will have everything a programmer will need to actually create the system. Next, we shift into the more fun stuff, programming. Now, this is when the code for the program is finally written, and using the system design document as a guide, a programmer develops the program. Now, the result of this phase is an initial working program that meets requirements laid out in the system analysis phase, and the design developed in the system design phase. Next, we shift into testing. In the testing phase, the software program developed in the previous phase is put through a series of structured tests. The first is a unit test, which tests individual parts of the code for errors or bugs or any kinds of glitches like that. Next is a system test, where the different components of the system are tested to ensure that they work together properly. Finally, the user acceptance test allows those that will be using the software to test the system themselves to ensure that it meets their standards. Any bugs, error, glitches, or problems found during the testing are addressed and then retested after. Next, we shift into implementation. Now, once we've done the testing and the new system is developed and tested, it has to be implemented into the organization. So this phase includes training the users, providing documentation, and conversion from any previous system to the new system. Implementation can take many forms depending on the type of system, the number and type of users, and how urgent it is that the system become operational. These different forms of implementation are covered later in the chapter, of course. Next, we shift into maintenance. Alright, this is the last phase. The final phase that takes place on the implementation phase is finally complete with this. Now, in this phase, the system has a structured support process in place, reported bugs are fixed, and requests for new features are evaluated and even implemented. System updates and backups are performed during this phase on a regular basis too. Now, this methodology is sometimes referred to as the waterfall methodology to represent each step in as a separate part of the process. Only when one step is completed can another step begin. After each step, an organization must decide whether to move to the next step or not. This methodology has been criticized for being quite rigid. For example, changes to the requirements are not allowed once the process has begun. No software is available until after the programming phase. And again, SDLC was developed for large, structured projects, so projects using SDLC can sometimes take months or even years to complete. So because of this inflexibility and the availability of new programming techniques and tools, many other software development methodologies have been developed. So many of these retain some of the underlying concepts, but are not necessarily as rigid or as harsh or firm or kind of concrete as this one is. So thank you for listening to my presentation on the systems development lifecycle. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good night.